While the wrestlers are obviously pretty damn important to WWE, it is World Wrestling Entertainment after all, it is also the job of the non-wrestling contingent of on-air personalities to provide some of the entertainment value. Or in the case of these guys and gals, maybe not. Because for every announcer, interviewer, reporter, or play-by-play commentator who carves out a niche for themselves or even becomes irreplaceable, there are plenty more who leave little, if any, lasting impression. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 WWE non-wrestlers you don't remember. Join us. Number 10, Reo Rodgers. You look like Rio Rogers. You act like Rio Rogers. Your name is Rio Rodgers, but I got wise. You're Bruce Pritchard in disguise. Yes, you're not fooling me, Brucey P, because I know that's you under the fake Fu Manchu moustache. While Vince McMahon's right-hand man may have found success as the unspeakably annoying but very effective Brother Love, he wasn't so lucky when it came to Reo Rodgers. The 2-week tenure of Reo Rodgers began when Jerry Lawler had to take some time off to deal with, personal business. Pritchard was roped in because he made people in the office, particularly Jerry Jarrett, laugh with his dead-on Dusty Rhodes impression. Bruce didn't believe a whole act based around his affectionate mimicry would work, and you know something? He was right. Against Pritchard's reservations, Vince threw the character on air after Pritchard had received the American Dream's blessing, with Rodgers providing commentary on superstars and even getting his own one-shot talk show segment called Rio's Roundup. After a fortnight, the character was axed at the behest of WWE production chief Kevin Dunn, and much to the delight of Brucey P. Number 9, Ken Resnick. Killer Ken Resnick may not have actually killed anyone that we know about, but he did show up on WWE television in the mid-80s. Resnick had worked as a sports reporter prior to getting a gig with Vern Gagne's American Wrestling Association in 1983, replacing the outgoing Gene Okerlund as an interviewer. After leaving the AWA, Ken's pal Blackjack Lanza convinced him to audition for a job with WWE, and he was duly hired on. Interviewing many of the biggest stars of the day, as well as hyping upcoming cards in major markets, Resnick was perfectly serviceable in his role, and it felt like he at least did his prep work before going on air. His WWE run was not a long one, however, as he left the company after less than a year. Post-WWE, Resnick did some work for other organizations like the Ladies Professional Wrestling Association and the American Wrestling Federation. WWE themselves flirted with the idea of bringing Ken back into the fold during the 90s, but it never quite panned out. Number 8, Steve Romero. Of all the announcers WWE have had throughout the decades, Steve Romero was definitely one of them. Romero wore many hats, figuratively speaking that is. I never saw him wear an actual one, though for someone who showed up seemingly here, there and everywhere, you would be hard-pressed to pick him out of a lineup. Joining WWE in December of 2004, our man Steve arrived with a mightily impressive resume, having spent 15 years in the sports broadcasting field. He had covered Super Bowls and Stanley Cups, but he wouldn't quite make it to WrestleMania, instead being assigned to commentate the lowly weekend shows Velocity and Heat. Romero also acted as a host of WWE 24/7, was the co-host of Bite This for a time, and worked briefly as a backstage interviewer on both Raw and SmackDown. Oh, I should also note that Steve was his working name and that his real-life name was Todd, but I guess Mr. Grisham already laid claim to that moniker? In any event, Romero quietly left WWE in 2007 when WWE neglected to renew his contract. The streets will never forget. Number 7, Stephanie Wyand. I suppose when you're being introduced as Todd Pettingill's Christmas present, things can only get better from there. Brought in to quote-unquote replace Randy Savage, Stephanie Wyand made her debut on the December 12, 1994 episode of WWF Mania. Not quite the larger-than-life, ultra-charismatic presence of the Macho Man, Stephanie at least stood out as she was one of very few women in the company at the time. She and Pettingill were let's say, acquired taste, however, and never quite got their patter down to an exact science. Or to put it more plainly, they were positively excruciating to together on screen. Stephanie was involved in a few memorable moments, mind, co-hosting the '94 Slammy Awards as well as the first In Your House pay-per-view, where she and Todd memorably gave away an actual house. WWE may have been happy to gift some fan a roof over their head gratis, but they were actually going through some dark times financially, and Stephanie was let go in the summer of 1995 as part of sweeping budget cuts. Number 6, Joe Fowler. SummerSlam 1993 is remembered for many things. Ted DiBiase's final WWE match, The Undertaker taking on Giant Gonzalez in a rematch at least 6 people wanted to see, Lex Luger celebrating his count-out victory over WWE champion Yokozuna as if he just won the lottery. For me though, SummerSlam 93 will linger forever in my memory due to the debut of backstage interviewer Joe Fowler. A successful sportscaster who also dabbled in acting, Fowler popped up at the biggest party of the summer to get the thoughts and feelings of various WWE stars. That was about as good as it got for our man, who also did some work introducing matches on All American Wrestling before he was let go after just a few months. After leaving WWE, Fowler became well known as a pitchman in infomercials, which means he's actually better at selling than most of the WWE roster at the time. Zing! With all due respect to Ludwig Borger, of course. I would encourage any of my fellow Fowler maniacs to check out his work playing a reporter in Cobra, The Mighty Ducks, and Independence Day. Hey, you can even come round my house for a VHS triple bill. Number 5, Bonnie Blackstone. A lifelong fan of the business, Bonnie Blackstone used her genuine passion and abundant knowledge to secure a job as a presenter for the syndicated Superstars of Wrestling show between 1986 and 1992. Treated seriously in an era where females were typically dismissed, Bonnie later followed her husband, Joe Pedicino, for a short stint in his newly launched Global Wrestling Federation before taking a break from the industry. She tried to get back into it by sending an audition tape to WCW, but never heard back. WWE were interested, however, and hired her in the spring of '93. Blackstone could be spied holding a microphone on shows like Superstars, All American Wrestling, and Wrestling Challenge during the summer. Her time in WWE didn't last long though, and she would be gone come November. WWE were making cutbacks, and she, along with ring announcer Mike McGurk, were deemed surplus to requirements. In her prime, Bonnie was sort of like Renee Young in that she was enthusiastic, credible, and had an inherently likability about her. Had she come along during a different era, her WWE career may well have ended up being more notable. Number 4, Rue DeBonner. I was going to use this opportunity to look at former interviewer and WWE home video host Craig DeGeorge until I realised that nobody would care. So instead, I'm going to use this opportunity to look at former on-air personality Rue DeBonner, mainly because her surname sounds a bit like a German person saying the boner, and that's quite funny to me, certainly funnier than DeGeorge anyway. Having appeared on Star Search when she was just 13 years old and with a CV that boasted credits in shows like The Sopranos and some major advertising campaigns, DeBonner was welcomed to Team WWE in September of 2003 after an extensive hiring process. She didn't have any product knowledge, but she did have a pretty face and a lovely singing voice. She had a hit single a decade earlier as a member of the group Boy Crazy, which was enough to convince WWE to give her a shot. Unfortunately, her lack of sports entertainment know-how or passion for the stuff shone through, and the company gave up on her fairly quickly. Released in the summer of 2004, DeBonner would subsequently marry and then divorce her Afterburn co-host Josh Matthews. Number 3, Charlie Min. Following in the nerdy footsteps of that loser dork Jameson, Charlie Min was a so-called superfan who somehow secured a position as a roving reporter. Sure, put Charlie Min on the payroll, but when I show up at Titan Towers offering to act as Mojo Rawley's manager for nothing more than a van full of expired ICO Pro, you call security and have me escorted off the premises? Anyway, always far too excited to interact with a WWE superstar, Min gave all us filthy marks a bad name with his constant screaming and fawning. As well as acting like a dweeb in front of the boys, Min also provided live event news updates. According to Jim Ross, Charlie thought that he was hot stuff and let everybody know about it, so he got ribbed a lot, and it's no real shocker that his WWE career was of the fleeting variety. Brought in because he was young and fit in with the company's new generation drive to attract a more youthful audience, I would wager that Min's hyperactive delivery likely had the opposite effect as intended. Number 2, Barbara Bush. Getting into the business via the time-honored tradition of being scouted at a Hooters restaurant, Kathy Dingman spent a few years on the indies before trying her luck by sending tapes to WWE and was hired in 1999. Originally set to portray a nurse named Connie Lingus, Vince Russo, I swear to God, she was instead tasked with playing an EMT named Barbara Bush, or BB for short. Ostensibly there to attend to the medical needs of WWE-stricken stars, BB was mainly used as eye candy in bikini contests and clothes-shedding matches. Kathy supposedly would have preferred to actually wrestle and manage as she had done on the indies, but accepted her lot and tried to make the best of it. She did get involved physically now and then and was one of the women put through a table by those damn Dudleys. But while she was still picking splinters out of her spine, BB was released by WWE, much to the annoyance of her then boyfriend, Bob Hardcore Holly. Or perhaps he was elated. It can be hard to tell with old Sparky Plug. Number 1, Max Bretos. Max Bretos was covering football in the early to mid-2000s when he landed a job with WWE. A longtime fan of the business, Bretos was hired on to act as a backstage interviewer. As far as I can tell, he showed up a few times on Raw in early 2007 and then made just a handful of appearances on SmackDown during the summer. Bretos pretty much flew under the radar and was just sort of there as a guy to hold the stick and ask the big questions like, could I have your thoughts on your match later? And, well, that's about it, to be honest. That said, Max reportedly got high marks from people backstage for his professionalism and for, actually knowing about the product. Bretos would leave WWE for unknown reasons, though he did work closely with another former WWE announcer, Jonathan Coachman, at ESPN. I don't really know much about ESPN broadcasters, but I can only assume based on charisma and star power alone that they were that channel's version of the Mega Powers.